All right, guys, the pain stops with me, right? This is a term that I don't think many of us utilize today. I've heard some people use it. One of my friends, Jake Kaufman, who just had an amazing book put out, he talks about this. The pain stops with me, and he talks about healing trauma. And the reason why the pain stops with us is because there's a way that this continual cycle of pain gets passed off to next generations. It gets passed off to other people in our lives, like people who support us or people that we love, because of the fact that externally we give that energy out, and also we place that toxic behavior associated with that pain on them. Now, again, this is what it means to say that it passes to the next generation. When we have that external manifestation of whatever that pain internally is causing us, it tends to reflect, especially on the next generation. And then what happens is that next generation has a set of pain, or has a piece of pain from you that was given to them that they now have to figure out either to heal or pass on to the next generation. So this is why I love, Truman's saying of the buck stops here. The buck stops here was a saying that he came up with that said basically that anything that comes to the Oval Office and comes to his desk, he will not make an excuse. He will solve the problem. That he is responsible for doing that, and the buck stops with him, right? And so we can personally hold ourselves accountable in life if we keep that mentality, and especially when it comes with pain, because pain can start being generational, and for no reason other than the fact that the previous generation decided not to heal it or didn't have the tools to be capable enough to heal the pain. So when we go into this and the pain stopping with you, you are Truman. You are President Truman sitting at his desk saying the buck stops here, right? You were saying the pain stops here. And what does that mean? That means you actually got to work, right? And so the first piece of that is you got to recognize the pain within you. Whatever that is, guys, like we can't keep shoving it down. Like that is not really good. And we'll talk about that in a second. But we've got to identify, acknowledge, and recognize what is going on internally, and then ask ourselves what was the previous what was the precursor to that emotion or to that trauma. So maybe it was something when you were younger, somebody violated you. Maybe it was the fact that you are ashamed of decisions you made when you were younger. You're embarrassed because that's not the man you are. Maybe you've changed a lot since then. That's okay too. We go through different seasons in our lives of what we believe right and wrong are, what is okay and what's not okay. You look at, like, for instance, growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, people used to say, as a term of making fun of somebody, we used to say faggot. And that was something commonly used with me growing up. And then obviously if times has changed, like, oh, that's really hurtful. We shouldn't be saying that shit. And so that is one of the terms that we don't really say anymore unless we're being extremely rude, mean, or derogatory towards somebody, right? But we used to sling that thing around like just playing on the playground. It was just like a thing. And so again, I say that to illuminate what it means to have seasons and things of being okay and not okay, right? So as we've grown as men and boys, certain things in our lives or actions or words have become, we're okay at one point because of where we were mindset-wise or where the environment was mindset-wise. And later in life, we realized that that wasn't good, or that's not a good piece to keep in our lives anymore. So anyways, we have to recognize the pain within us, and that is by understanding where it came from, what was the precursor to it, and how you need to acknowledge that. And we'll move into that here in a few anyways. But recognizing it is the first thing. We have to put a spotlight on it. If we don't do that, we cannot heal it whatsoever. The next piece is that, obviously, shouldn't have to say this, but I will. We push down our feelings constantly. We push down the trauma constantly. And we're taught to do this as men. And I know you guys have heard this a million times, and you're going to keep hearing it because it is one of the things that we have to live with as far as accepting that it happened. But it's not one of the things that we have to carry, right? And so we shove this stuff down because people told us that stoic, quiet, do-it-yourselfers were the kind of men that needed to be in this world. And in all honesty, there's a little bit of value to some of that. that can help you. But there's a lot of, non-value to that as well, and harm that can come because of it. So it's a very, very thin edge, razor's edge. But we don't want to shove it down, and we don't want to live by the old rules that we were given and say that that was a real man. Real men actually come to terms with their shit. They don't pass it down and perpetuate it. They come to terms with it, understand it, and acknowledge it. And if we can do that, now we've gotten through that second piece, right? We're not shoving it down anymore. We're letting it come up, and we're receiving it in whatever way it comes up. If it's whatever emotion it comes up in, that's what you're doing. When you recognize it and then you allow it to come up, you get to receive it however it comes up, whether it's anger, whether it's crying, whether it's excitement, jubilation, who knows, whatever the scenario is, and then what it is that comes up emotionally for you, and then how you treat that emotion, right? It could be excitement because the fact that you found it and you're just happy to acknowledge it now. And all of a sudden it puts a smile on your face just to be acknowledged. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt still, but it could just be like, oh, I'm getting acknowledged. Dope. This is great. I don't have to constantly sit underneath in the shadows anymore. So stop shoving that shit down. Now, that can look something like talking about it. That can look something like writing it out. That can look something like going on a plant medicine journey and focusing on that trauma, that thought, and allowing it to process through that modality. I mean, it can look a lot of different ways. There's no right answer. The only right answer is the fact that we cannot shove it down, and we need to process it or acknowledge it. There's certain theories out there that have shown that you don't necessarily have to move through it. And that was done by, I think it was Dr. John Connell. And he was talking about how his rapid, if I remember this correctly, rapid response therapy or something like that. Anyways, we did a podcast with him, and I feel really bad because I can't remember what that was, RRT. Anyways, there are other versions of how to deal with trauma. But still, we acknowledge it, and we briefly touch on it, and we receive it, and we receive the emotions that come with it, right? So that's all true and consistent. So think that if you don't heal, you will pass this on. Just think about that. Do you want your kids to have this? Do you want a younger generation, who may not be your kids, who look up to you though, and value you very highly, because kids make their own perceptions of people, and they latch onto you and receive whatever you're passing to them? Do you want that to be the next case? I personally do not. So I do try to find those traumas, heal them, and work with them so I don't pass that. And that comes with questioning. We have to question the way we behave, the way we say things, and see if it is provoked by something that's deeper inside of us, not consciously. And so this is part of identifying that trauma. And if you think that if you don't heal this, that you're going to pass this on, if you think about that, you're going to look at trauma a little differently. And maybe we stop saying trauma, because, I mean, oh man, it can be, they have little t and big T trauma. I understand that, but sometimes it can just be an effect where it might not be traumatic, but it could be impacting you in a way that you're like, man, it just makes me feel a little negative. It doesn't necessarily have to be like trauma per se. Trauma as we think about trauma. Like, when we had difference in the military, we had wounds and we had traumas, right? Trauma was like, oh fuck, like shit hit the fan. We really need to get this guy. It's a significant piece of damage to a human being. And then there's wounds where it's like, all right, he can keep moving. He can keep on the mission. He can keep doing what he needs to do. It's like a wound, right? We got a wounded dude. Cool. All right. Then we got trauma. Two different things for us that was. So I look at that. I look at us healing internally as both as well. I look at that as trauma, and I look at those as wounds. And what I'm referring to is the fact that it could be trauma, but it also could just be a wound. It could be a light wound that could take a bandage, and then you can keep moving on, and it's going to heal itself, right? And that is a powerful thing. But the same thing is, we still have to acknowledge it. We still have to recognize it. We still have to, process it. And and allow those emotions to come through us. If we're not going to do that, then we're going to continue to struggle in life. And then we're going to also continue to shove it down because that's our escape mechanism. So you're perpetuating an entire cycle here just simply based on the fact that you are not willing to say that the pain stops with you. Think about that. Think about the damage you're not just causing to yourself, but you're causing to other people in your life. Now, I don't know what this looks like to you guys. I just know a lot of men deal with this and a lot of men do not acknowledge it. I know a lot of men are stuck with it and they struggle with it and they don't have a method of processing it. And I'm here to tell you it's very simple. Use one of the modalities I just mentioned, something like as easy as journaling is a processing tool. That 100% is. It allows people to get that out and to release that energy and to put a light on the issue that they're struggling with. And don't be scared that somebody's going to see it. Make sure that you just end up acknowledging that, and then also that you end up, allowing it to be seen by you. And if you're scared somebody's going to see it, just make sure that you hide it, or talk to your wife and be like, hey, listen, I have a journal. I just don't really want anybody looking at it. I'm going to put it here. I would appreciate it if you just leave that alone, because that's something that's personal to me and it's me just processing stuff. If you're very honest with your communication and things about things that you're dealing with, then you're going to end up having a much better, healthier communicative life in general. So all of this comes in combination of one another. But like I said, the pain stops with you. The buck stops here. Guys, stop passing on pain by shoving this down. Stop shoving down your struggles, your issues, your pain, all of this stuff. Stop suppressing that. Let yourself experience it and then let yourself move past it. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode. See y'all next week.